Welcome to the Digital Insurance Agent Podcast. I'm so glad you've chosen to join us today. And with me again is Nikki Coner. She is the CEO and founder of Packaged to Profit. And Nikki, it's good to have you with us again today.
Thank you so much for having me, Carl.
Absolutely. So last time we dug into a lot of sales discussions. We looked at closing, we talked about building a winning team. Today we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to start talking about some of the challenges in the insurance industry and a lot of the hurdles that agents are facing. And we'll talk about how to overcome some of those things confidently and also being very innovative in how to do that. And so it's going to be an exciting topic. So we're glad you have chosen to join us today. And with that, Nikki, let's just kind of back up a little bit for anybody that didn't get to catch the first two interviews we did together. Give us just a little quick background and let's talk about how you got involved in the insurance industry and really what you've been doing to help agents succeed. And then we'll dive into our discussion points today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is I have been in the insurance space for going on about 15 years now. And so initially, the way that I started was one of my colleagues had reached out to me and wanted me to help them on the back end with operations and support. Long story short, I ended up doing it as a backup service. One of my very first clients was in State Farm. And so from there, I've just been referred after referral to different agents. And as I identified, 95% of my clients were in the insurance space. We decided to talk more to insurance agents and just help them overcome the challenges that they're facing, which I know we're going to talk about today. So I'm trying to avoid going into that. But overall, that's the biggest thing. That's how I got started. I've generated over 100 million in sales within our agency today, and it's right now it's like you have to pivot. You have to change, and so I'm really getting more vocal about that for the industry and helping agents be able to stand out and stay in business.
Wow, what a great segue into what we are talking about. So let's really talk about three of the biggest challenges you see right now that agents are facing in the current climate. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are those, top three pain points that just keep coming up over and over again right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first pain point that I keep seeing is seeing inconsistent performance across the teams. So the agents are skilled, but they lack the structure, they lack the accountability, and they lack the emotional intelligence in order to sustain the role.
Yeah. And then, are you seeing some other, though not just the internal things, but are you seeing some external pressures as well that are maybe really forcing them to have to think about maybe the way they've done business before? And this is going to sound a little bad when I say it. It's kind of shown where they've gotten lazy.
Absolutely. So prior, especially when in California, as I shared on a previous episode, um, they were spoiled. They were used to being referred to from real estate agents. They knew that that book of business was always going to be coming in. You didn't have to work as hard. You didn't have to really focus on honing in, refining your skill sets. Doing cookie cutter e-learning systems that were outdated for like 20 plus years ago worked, right? Because that is what got the previous agents there. But things have definitely shifted. And so that's the biggest thing. Um, yeah, and then the other two that I keep seeing as well. So we talked about inconsistent performance across teams, right? Another thing that I'm seeing is shifting client expectations. So the client's expectation, which is where we're going with this is it's changed, right? So today's client, they really expect speed. However, you need to be able to deliver it with transparency and you need to have a personalized experience, right? It's no longer, people coming in, they're taking your word for what's being said. right? And you just focus on closing the deal. Like you really have to create a personalized experience and a personalized culture because that is what people are craving. So it's kind of going back to that old school, mom and pop type of environment. Like they really enjoy that. And I believe companies like State Farm are in great prime position to be able to create that. Another thing that I'm also learning as their challenges is the operational overwhelm. There are some companies that are just now starting to really utilize their CRM. And because, like I said, they were lazy, they were getting spoiled, they were used to leads just coming into them, not really having to get out there and show their face at, chambers and let them know, hey, I am here to stay. And let them know that they're the agent to go to, and then educating them. There's some companies that I didn't even know offer certain services if it wasn't for me working with them. Some of them are not even showing up um, and sharing, the different opportunities that they have at their advantage to help their clients.
Yeah. You brought up an interesting point that I kind of want us to delve into for a minute. We've seen a shift, I think, post pandemic, where convenience is great, but people seem to really almost be going back a little bit to I want that personalized service. Yeah, I want the convenience, but I want to know there's a human being on the backside of that that has my back. And is that kind of what you're seeing?
Absolutely. And to be 100% transparent, that's why I love insurance industry. That's why I chose it over any industry out there is because the agents show up, right? They're consistent. When I was, in different areas and different industries, I noticed that insurance was consistent. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, they were there. They were in the office. Now there are some that are no longer in business who did try to um, take that entrepreneur approach and show up whenever, but that does not work and sustain. But pre-pandemic, the emphasis on visibility and being present physically wasn't really there, right? Post-pandemic, clients now expect to not just have that physical, but also to have the digital so that they know that they're there physically. I mean, because I did a survey last year where I went through Google and I put in all the insurance agents' offices, and I can't tell you how many offices I went to and nobody was there. So you need to be not just digitally there, but you need to be responsive. And then you also need to be emotional intelligent at scale, because a lot of times there are things that come up that these clients are frantic about. You need to be able to emotionally direct them and not let their emotions control you, which is another thing that I'm seeing that especially our Gen Z is, is struggling with right now. So, which changes the demand for deeper connection, delivered faster, and also having more flexibility for the client.
Yeah. Let's kind of dive into, one of the things that I see happening, you mentioned especially in California, there are some emerging industry trends and some things that, the agent can't necessarily control, but they do have to be paying close attention to because it's going to force them to be very nimble on their feet if they're going to stay competitive.
Right.
And so let's talk about some of those trends that you're seeing that are forcing agents to really, they can't be asleep at the wheel. They've got to be paying attention to these trends if they're going to stay ahead of the game. What would you say some of those things are right now that you're seeing at the forefront?
Yeah, so some of the emerging trends that I see is how do I say this? So the rise of embedded insurance in consumer products. So, diversification when it comes to serving their clients. And to be honest with you, like they had the package all along, but they were just focused on one thing. So being able to diversify that, and they need to really shift towards consultative selling, which is really like advisory based selling instead of product pushing. And so, just to elaborate a little bit on what that means is when you're, pushing, auto, for instance, right? Like you're like, trying to sign the client up, but you want to advise them because 9 times out of 10, almost 10 out of 10 these days, they already have insurance, right? However, I will say an agent did share with me recently that the cost of is going up right now due to the lack of insurers, like not even they're just like not even willing to pay for it, but that's a whole nother conversation. But you do need to have that advisory approach. If they don't have insurance, okay, figure out why they don't have insurance. Don't just zoom straight to and think that they're going to swipe their card, because there are people opting out of, I'm forget it, I'll just take the loss, right?
Yeah.
So having that part, and then also too, you want to increase the demand of financial literacy support alongside policies. That is so crucial. Um, when I talk to agents, almost 9 times out of 10, they don't know this, but 65% of baby boomers are not prepared to retire. And they're at the retirement age right now, right? So they're there within the next 10 to 20 years. So what can you do to create something aggressively and package them together? Like, this is a great time to monetize that, because those policies are paying dividend, they're paying a lot. So I would really focus on those baby boomers where you could package um life, right? Long-term care, if your agency provides that. Like, what are some ways that you can provide them some financial literacy information where they could be equipped for it? And there's
Hmm.
so many different strategies and you could do it. I shared it on the last episode, how we, do in-person events. That's a great way. I have one of my clients, they specifically target that audience, and they host events where they bring out the 55 and up. We, go to Roof Chris and they dine them out and they say, hey, this is where you're at. Are you prepared for what's going to come over these next 20, 25 years? And you're physically not going to be able to work, in about 10 years. What can we do to prepare for that? And those policies, man, they pay big. So the losses in the areas that some companies may be missing out on revenue, they can make that up in their supporting and shifting towards the baby boomers.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and I kind of wanted to delve into this. I know a lot of the agents right now, especially states like California, they may have lost their ability to sell certain parts of their product line that they've always relied on.
Mhm.
And, they're having to look at getting creative. What else could I be doing? And I love what you just talked about. What are you missing? What are the opportunities that are still available to you that you could be cross selling? You could be diving into, maybe taking on more of that advisory process. And so let's talk about that a little bit, about becoming indispensable to your book of business, even if maybe the environment is not necessarily in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. So so just to reiterate, so you're asking me how to become indispensable in the industry.
Yeah, so you've got your clientele, and I'm kind of taking a little dog leg here based on where we're talking, and things, rates may not be in your favor. Your company may say, hey, right now we're not going to let you write any more policies in this particular product service line, but you've taken the time to already develop those relationships. And what I see a lot of our agents, wrestling with is, how do I keep those clients if I can't offer them everything I've always been able to offer them? Is there a way to still create value? And I think you just brought up one of those things. Are you looking at other needs in their life that maybe you haven't been focused on, but you could refocus and reshift the trajectory of your business towards?
Absolutely. Okay, got it. So that is basically where I was thinking you were asking. So one of the biggest things is create a way to educate them beyond their policy, right? So most of my clients who don't have I'll say, when I walk into the office, 9 times out of 10, they don't have a specific type of way to serve, to add additional things to their clients. So, for instance, um, I'll bring on a client and I'll notice I'm looking at a client and they, in the notes, they were expecting a baby in 9 months. Well, have you called that person, right? And said, hey, I know you're having your baby's due, or hey, I know you had your baby, congratulations, send a congratulation card, right? Or some type of thing, in a way to be able to educate them beyond their actual policy. So that's what I recommend. I personally would target the baby boomers, like I said before, going through those current policies. So if you know that, for instance, with California, you can't add, home or whatever, but maybe you find a loophole where you can increase what they have, right? So they increase their protection, of what they currently have. Maybe the protection that they had before wasn't enough. And so one thing that I do invite my clients to do is to create a, this is a little bit much, but you create a booking link, for the clients, and say, hey, I would love to get you on my calendar to be able to schedule an assessment of your current policy. And to be mindful of your time, you could give that link to where maybe up to 5 or 10 clients could actually book during that same time slot, and you have your agents come in and be able to tap in during that time to take them into individual rooms, right? Zoom has it. Right? I am very, very strategic with my clients. Like, how are we going to maximize what we have and, squeeze as much of that juice out as we possibly can? And then also too, you want to anticipate before they ask. So one anticipation before they ask is, um so some companies make it really hard, but a lot of our clients know that their insurance is getting ready to go up, right? And so maybe you create an info session where you know that they have questions about the policy that's going up. If they understand it, 9 times out of 10, they're not going anywhere. I know my family's not. Like, we love our agent, we love, the company we're with. And so taking that time to explain that to them is huge. Another thing is too personalizing the relationship, right? I teach my agents all the time, like, hey, when I'm looking at in their CRM, I'm like, oh my God, you don't have this person's birthday, like you don't have this person's anniversary day. Like, these are things that you can maximize to your best ability. And I use this example of, so I purchased a BMW from BMW San Diego about 12 years ago. Do you guys know every single year that guy still sends me a birthday card, and I've moved 3 times since I purchased that car. He still sends me a birthday card. He still sends me a happy new year, and it's personalized. And there are ways that you can send it out. It doesn't have to be personalized, though. I would be totally fine with it, but there are companies that you can, incorporate with your CRM that will send it out, and then it looks personalized to the client. And so just having that personalization touch. To be honest with you, if I go through a car, like, he's who I go to, and he's actually gone to the ranks through the company. So, and then the last thing is to own the limitation. So let's be real. Stop avoiding what's going on.
Yeah.
I keep seeing agents like try to dance around it, like, stop. Like, we feel it, right? And so when you're avoiding it, we feel like, okay, well, what else are they hiding? Right? And that just automatically loses your credibility. So make sure that you are, addressing, what's going on. Say, hey, here's what's changed, right? I want to walk you through the changes. The fact that you're taking the time out and just sharing that with your client is huge. And I get it. You might take a step back, right? Because you're spending more time than what you normally would on a policy, but it'll pay long-term dividends, especially as your agency is, like, they pay on top of every time they're renewing, right? So it's just, added income.
That's good. Yeah, I think that the danger is, there's the agent that hides from bad news, and there's the agent that hits it head on. And that's what I was hoping I could pull out of you here was
Okay.
hit that head on. Let's not hide from the bad news. Uh,
Yes, absolutely.
so let's talk about the competition today is direct to consumer insurance platforms. Progressive is head to head with State Farm on auto insurance. Probably gonna outpace them this year. It looks like. So one of the things that certainly the legacy agencies are having to look at is how do they maintain their relevance in that type of environment. And what's your recommendation with that when you're going head to head? with those companies. How do you maintain that positioning?
Absolutely. So, I'm going to use some personal experience here. So, one of the things I do want to say though is don't try to compete on speed or the automation alone. And I think that's where some agents are trying to get caught up on. Like they're so caught up on, oh my God, I've been an agent for 20 years. We're just now embracing the CRM. Let me go in and learn as much as I need to learn. You don't need to. You can focus on some key points that I have mentioned. I'm not gonna, go through them, but you can go back and, listen to some of the ways that I use it. You can go back and just use it for those key points. You don't have to learn the entire CRM and everything it's capable of. Being able to compete with empathy, your expertise, and your experience alone is huge. Right. Whereas one platform, if you go to you mentioned progressive, right? If you may be able to go there and get a quote, right? But it doesn't really understand your client's real concerns, right? Like, yes, it may give them a number, but there's no humanization to it. So how can you provide that empathy? How can you provide that expertise? How can you provide that experience for the client? And so a lot of times, clients are looking for different ways because they've had a claim that they filed and they weren't fully covered, and it was because that agent didn't take the time out to educate them. So how can you set yourself apart there? And then when agents lean into relationships and emotional intelligence, they become irreplaceable, right? They become priceless, and that's huge. So I'll give you an example. Me personally, for our business, we use business funding, right? To monitor our business. 9 times out of 10, like we get a better response having a relationship with a banker who can lend us money, or someone that's connected to them that can lend us money versus just going straight online to a portal and filling it out. And the reason being is because there's somebody there that can hear, that can empathize with what we have going on. And they also are understanding where we're headed, right? If they just look at where we're at on paper, they may not be able to give us a customized plan, right? The system can't do that. And so being able to use that empathy to your advantage is huge.
Absolutely. Now, as we're going through, this changing environment, obviously there's regulatory shifts, there's legal shifts that come along with that, um, and especially at a state level, that's where you see a lot of this taking place. What are some of your best tips for staying compliant without getting bogged down in the minutia of these changing regulatory, laws and compliance procedures that come down the pike?
Absolutely. So, I want to give some tips here, some actionable tips. So, as you are building and you want to build your compliance into your workflows, right? So, you want to have someone in the office that is specifically devoted towards non-sales activities, and they're able to do this. And so, as the different compliances are coming down the workflow, yes, there may be some things that you need to change within your workflow to be compliant. Have that person be in position to immediately be able to apply them so that you're not having to be the person to do it. And I'm right now, when I say you, as I'm speaking to the agency owner who's running the office, try to pass it to someone else in the office because your time is valuable. And so you don't want to wait until something goes wrong. You want to use a checklist, right? Schedule routine policy reviews. So maybe this person that you have that you're delegating it with, as they're coming down the pipeline, you're spending time with them. Um, and maybe it's, oh, shoot, at this point, once a month, right? Where you're meeting with them and you're going through the updated policy reviews. So, like, for instance, there's some companies that may um they're embracing AI, but then like they're pushing away from it. So like what parts of AI are they willing to implement, and you add that to your policy or your workflows and how you operate within the business. So you just have that one person that has that checklist and that's being able to add it. And then also too, you want to get a legal or compliance consultant, right, to audit your process quarterly. That's just what I recommend. When it's embedded into your operation, it will totally relieve you of the burden. Now, you don't necessarily have to get someone specifically out of your company. You can run the numbers and see which is more effective, if it's cheaper to hire a consultant or more cost efficient. I shouldn't say cheaper, but more cost efficient to hire a consultant, or having that person be in house periodically, and they're the ones that's dealing with claims and so forth. Because there's some agents that are listening here, they don't even have to worry about dealing with the claims. They don't have to worry about when a client calls in. They just push them to customer service. But there are some people that are listening that in their office, if a client gets a claim, they have to deal with it in office. So you want to make sure that, maybe that person is a person that is efficient to deal with the compliance consulting and so forth for your agency.
Absolutely. And then, with these, compliance, challenges, this is also a great opportunity to build client trust and loyalty. And how does an agent go about doing that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is that understanding the clients, like with the agent, like you need insurance, you need to be insured. So you know what it feels like to be a client, right? You know what it's like to be in that seat. And I think sometimes we get into our profession and we forget what it feels like to be on that other side. So understand that clients are nervous about risk, right? But the agents who are proactively communicating the changes build massive trust, right? So as long as you're communicating with the client, that is the best way to build trust. So instead of saying we need to update your policy, right? I'll give you an example. You could say, here's what's changed, and here's how we're protecting you differently, right? I remember when my brother, he's in Florida. I remember when they took off, he was in an area where they took away a specific type of protection that affected him if a certain hazard happened, because he was in that, I forget the name of the zones. I always forget it, but it's just like with us in California, how we have the fire zones, and some fire zones, like in our home, we're protected with fire, right? But in some areas in California, like there's no protection in fire. Communicating that with them, right? My brother moved, right? Like he moved. He was like, "Hey, I want to stay with you guys." And instead of them actually losing a policy, they actually gained another property, right? So he
Hmm.
moved. And so he was able to still maximize, because he didn't want to lose his asset. Now, what if a disaster hit, that agent didn't express that to them? Not only did they lose out on a client, they lost out on a credibility, but then they also lost out on potential referrals and so forth. And so just communicating that with them is huge.
That's good. Now you talk a lot about, being proactive in agency growth. What are some of the innovative solutions that you've seen agencies use to just overcome some of these traditional obstacles that every agency faces?
Yeah. So one thing we do is we have protect quarterly protection planning events. Um is what I recommend for my clients. It has been a little bit more frequently recently because of all the changes, and some of my clients, they have like 1,500 clients to an office, or 2,000 clients. So we depends on the need. And I definitely recommend you hiring someone like myself to be able to come in and do that audit and see what you guys need. But hosting those quarterly protection planning events, where you're bringing out your clients and you're letting them know what the changes are. um, and if like for instance, SoCal, right? Those clients are going to be a little bit different than what NorCal is. So if you know that they're in a zone where they're no longer qualified, and then there is another zone that is qualified, try to group them by zones, right? You don't want to have somebody show up and they're no longer covered, and then you're talking about how those who are covered in protection. So like you really want to be strategic when you're doing the protection planning. So like it needs to be very well thought out when you're doing that. And then using the CRM automation more to follow up with leads based on behavior. If I was mentioning this in a previous episode, if when you're talking to someone and they mention to you, hey, I shop around every year, right? following up with them 3 months before their policy is getting ready to end because you know that they're going to shop around. You could always ask, "Hey, Mr. Jones, when do you typically start searching around for new, for like who your upcoming provider is going to be?" And they'll tell you, like, right? People have it on their calendars. I'm a huge planner. So, like, when there's something that I kind of want to shop around for or things that I want to do, it's on my calendar. So, make note of those things. What are some life changes that are going on with them, right? Being able to put that on the calendar. The CRM has it to where you can literally
Mm.
put, in the task, hey, Mr. Jones is planning to have a baby in December, December 25th, right? Not only when we send them Merry Christmas, but congratulations on your new addition to the family. Um, and then another thing is building emotional intelligence driven training programs for your teams to improve morale and closing rates. Um, Empathy is huge. Being able to have emotional intelligence embedded in your processes is huge. And um I can't emphasize that enough. Emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence. A lot
Yeah,
of times,
that's one of your favorites. So I love it.
yeah. How a person handles sales, it really goes down to emotional intelligence. And I was just doing after we hung up, I got some shocking numbers for you, by the way. So an emotional intelligent agent, right, when they are faced with a client who tells them no, it takes them a couple minutes to regroup back. But a non-emotional intelligent agent, can you guess how long it takes for them to regroup after being told no?
At least an hour.
24 to 72 hours every time they
Wow.
told no. So you have this agent who's being told in a high volume office no 15 times a day, and each of those no's is they're internalizing it. Whereas an emotional intelligent person is just rolling off, like I like to say, rolling off like duck water. And they're able to go to the next client. They're able to forget. Like, and that's what I'm really, really strong with is I'm able to hone in and keep going to the next person. I can get 89 no's and get one yes, and that one yes could be a game changer. I've done it before and on days where I've had back to back to back no's and I counted. I had 88 89 no's and that 90th person was a yes. And that yes was a huge yes, right? And it was worth my entire day. But when you have people who are not emotional intelligent, they would have never gotten to 80. They don't even get past 25
Hmm.
follow-ups. So it's huge.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. They would have given up at two or three.
Absolutely. And then you're spending your marketing dollars and you're wondering why your marketing dollars aren't converting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great numbers. So let's wrap up this episode. What's one of your favorite success stories of an agent that has turned just a major challenge into a massive breakthrough?
Yeah. So um I'm not going to really too much talk about metrics and numbers, but I'm going to just share one. So, I had one client. He was facing a major turnover, meaning that his attrition was he had about so on average, the industry is about 35% of your clients, 35% of your clients you end up losing, on an annual basis. Well, for him, it was 70%. He had low sales after losing their top producer. His sales had completely plummeted within his agency. So we started implementing emotional intelligence training because when we really identified, and I know I bring this in a lot, but when we really identified what the top performer had, who he had just lost, it was just that they were able to emotionally direct themselves and continue to stay focused on the goals, regardless of what was going on around them, right? And so um, we restructured their onboarding process. So we did do some training. We incorporated being able to identify those who are emotionally fit for the role. So as we were doing that, we're working on those who are in the office. And then we gave them some tools to self manage their performance. So in 60 days, they retain two new hires. And they were able to double their close rate. So with the current clients in there, so the agents at the time, they were doing about 30% in closing. They actually were able to double it. It was like 62, 63% that they were actually able to increase on closing on their leads. And in the office alone, you felt so much more alignment. You felt more like everyone was on the same page. You felt more like, when a client comes through that door, they got the same consistent experience. Whereas before, it was like you didn't know what you were gonna get. I actually tested it, and I had sent like 5 different people into his office, and we were testing it. Um, and so we realized that each experience was different. And then this time around, we were able to fine tune that. The biggest breakthrough though was that they were able to stop chasing sales and really they were starting to create value. And so we had events where we were educating the clients and so forth. And I will give one super tip as well. We were able to save him time. Carl, you've been in this industry long enough. This individual was doing welcome calls for each individual client that his agents were closing for him. He was doing individual welcome calls for each one because he had this fear of, well, he just lost his top performer. Well, what if the other people go and they're connected to the other people and they take them with them? Right. So I had to do some emotional intelligence training with
Mhm.
him because it was like, why do you feel like that? Right.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, it had nothing to do with the company. It had everything to do with what he brought into the company. And it just kind of further manifested when he lost his top producer, when he didn't think, that that person was going anywhere. And so we went through that, and we were able to save him more time. And so we increased his revenue by 45% because now instead of him doing individual calls, we strategically, we do group calls. Like, hey, if you want to do welcome calls and you want to have that personalized touch, um, let's go ahead and do a group call type environment. The client doesn't have to know that they're joining a group call welcome call, right? But they're still able to have the personalization. They can still know who you are. They can still know that you're the owner. But you didn't have to, spend individual time going through each person's policy. Like your agent should have been equipped with that. And so we went through all of that. But that's one of the biggest breakthroughs that I have seen. And I see it time and time again because 95% of my clients, they're coming from corporate America. And they come into insurance because they know they don't want to report to someone. So there is some things that we need to overcome to address why they are even in the like why they're even the owner of the business anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So why they decided to be an agency owner, there's usually some hurt, some pain behind that. And so we have to address that too. And then it trickles down to your team. When you start building a team, they feel it even though you're not saying it. And so yeah, that's where I start. I start with the agent first, then I go through the team and we identify what the SWOT analysis are. What are their strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats, right, of having this individual in your organization and what can we do to address them? So that's
That's great. That's awesome. So, Nikki, if somebody wants to connect with you, where can they do that? And how do they get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can join our info sessions. Well, we have a Scale Talks live weekly every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're catching this recording and it's not close to that time, we do have it where you can go to packagetoprofit.com/scale talks. And packaged as a package to profit.com and Scale Talks. And so what you'll do is you'll be able to hear like some of our live sessions that we've had. And then you'll be able to catch the recordings and you'll also be able to register for the next upcoming info session. The info session is where you bring your concerns, your questions, and so forth. And so we have that right after the Scale Talks. So that's at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you can always bring your concerns.
Fantastic. Nikki, it's been great having you with me again. And to our listeners, you're going to want to tune in to our next episode. We started broaching this on this one, but our next one, Nikki's going to dive into leveraging technology to build your business. And so be sure and join us on the next episode of the Digital Insurance Agent Podcast.